Right. Okay, just a quick announcement. So next week we are going to have the first CA quiz. Right, so this quiz will take up 25% of this particular course. Right, okay, so the date where the quiz will be conducted will be next Monday. Okay, next Monday. Right, the time will start at 4:45. We'll start at it sharp. Right, last for 30 minutes. Right, the quiz will be conducted across two LT. One is LT 26, the other is 27, according to this surname. So next Monday when you come, make sure you go to two LTs according to your surname. Right, okay, the format of the paper is this 30 set it down please. There are 30 multiple choice questions. Right, the topic that is going to be covered will be by the first professor. Okay, the week 1 to 3. For my part, you'll be covering the first 100 slides of the student version, the version that's available on Adventure. Right, okay, instruction, attendance is compulsory. Make sure you are punctual. Bring along your photo ID for verification. Right, and it's probably recommended you bring along a calculator in case there's any calculation that you need to do. Any questions regarding this CA? Right. So, on the day itself, when you come, right, as I mentioned, the quiz will be conducted across two LT according to your surname. Right, when you come, there will be two things given to each of you. One is the question booklet, the other is the optical form. Right, okay, so the cover page of the question booklet that you have will be something like this. Okay, so it's the quiz, right? So this is the question booklet. Right, what you need to do is make sure for the question booklet, you need to write your name as well as matriculation number. Okay, so this is the cover page. Right, okay, so this is the optical form. Right, for the optical form, what you need to do, okay, can you set it down please? Right, okay, for the optical form, make sure you write down the course code, your name, right, as well as the date it will be conducted, right, of course it will be next Monday. Right, okay, make sure you write your matriculation number, right, okay, and circle correctly. In the past, we have students somehow who write one here but circle another number and they cannot find their mark. Right, so make sure you are very careful about circling your matriculation number and of course the answer. Okay, set it down please. You can have a discussion outside later. Right. Okay, so, and then, as I mentioned, for the quiz, there will be 30 questions. So you just circle accordingly. Of course, this is just a mock-up answer, so don't memorize it. Right, the first instructor will later on post all these announcements on Adventure. If you want to have a look, you can have a look at it later. Right? So far, any questions regarding the quiz? Any questions? No, eh? Right, so in last week's lecture, we stopped at this particular part where we discussed about the relationship between the aperture setting with respect to the depth of field. Okay, so we are going to continue on. Right, so often when you go and buy a digital camera, I'm not sure how many of you have, set it down please. I'm not sure how many of you have actually gone to a shop to try to buy a digital camera. Can we just have a show of hands? Who has actually either go to buy a digital camera yourself or accompany your friend to buy a digital camera? Anyone? Okay, your class is a bit shy, huh? All right, okay, so if you have tried to go to a shop to buy a digital camera, you'll notice that one of the things that the salesperson will try to sell you is that, oh, they'll tell you, right, this camera has what kind of a digital zoom or optical zoom, right? And then they'll tell you the number of factors is very high. Okay, so actually, when you're trying to buy a camera, right, it's true that there's two types of zoom. One is the digital zoom, the other is the optical zoom. Right, between these two zoom, actually optical zoom is more important. Okay, optical zoom is the zooming that is supported by the digital camera, okay, by using the lens structure. So it's a zoom that is supported by the optical systems of the camera. Okay, whereas for digital zoom, it's a zooming that is rendered by the software feature, right? So that's why between this optical and digital zoom, optical zoom is actually more important. When you go and buy a camera, what you should be focusing on is the optical zoom and not the digital zoom, right? Because by changing the zooming factor that you have, you'll be able to zoom in the object you're trying to capture, and then you'll still be able to preserve pretty high quality images, okay? Whereas therefore optical zoom, right, by changing the focal length, you can change the object of the captured images, and the image quality will still remain high throughout this different zooming operation. Whereas for digital zoom, what it does is that, for example, if you are given a particular image, if you are talking about digital zoom, what it does is that, right, for example, you select this particular region to zoom in, you'll crop up this region, and then it will make use of some image processing algorithm to fill in the missing pixel. So the missing pixels that are being filled in is manipulated using a software algorithm, okay, or image processing technique. It has nothing to do with the optical capability of the lens. Whereas you can see in this case, right, a 10 times optical zoom, you zoom in, the image quality is still being preserved. So in short, when you're trying to buy a camera, okay, you should focus on this optical zoom, okay, because it's supported by the lens. Digital zoom, you can have 10 times, 20 times, 100 times. It really doesn't matter, okay, because it's a software feature. Right. I've also included a short video. Just, let me see. Not putting the.
Olympus Ultra Zoom. Get closer without getting closer.
Right, okay. So this actually demonstrates to you, the importance of looking for optical zoom when you buy a camera rather than the digital zoom. Right. Okay. So when you are trying to take a photo, one of the very important things is that you are trying to look at the focal length, right, of a digital camera. So what's the definition of a focal length? Focal length is simply defined as when the light comes into a lens, it will be focused to a particular point. So the focal length is defined as a distance from the lens to the point it's being focused on the image sensor. So the distance is defined as the focal length here. Right. Okay, so when you try to change the focal length of a camera, it will have some impact on the quality of the image you are trying to capture. So what happens is that, okay, when you change the focal length, right, the first thing that you notice is that your angle of view will change. Yeah? If you change the focal length of your digital camera, the angle of view, right, will change. So if your focal length is increased, you'll notice that your angle of view will become more narrow. Right? So that's the first thing you observe. The second thing is that as you increase the focal length, you'll see that the object size will become larger. So those are the two impacts you'll notice when you adjust the focal length. Right? So it's summarized here. If you increase the focal length, right, the view of angle will become smaller and the object that appear on the image will become larger. Okay? So in order to demonstrate that, we have this particular slide to show that. So you can see that for this particular diagram here, right, okay, this is the focal length. The focal length is indicated on top, right, starting from 14 mm to 20 mm all the way to, in this case, 600 millimeter here. So you can see that as you increase the focal length of the camera, your view angle or your angle of view become more and more narrow. Okay, more and more narrow. Right. Okay, another thing, so that's the first observation. If you increase the focal length, the angle of view will become more narrow or smaller. The second thing is that you notice as you increase this focal length, the object size will become larger and larger. Okay, will become larger and larger. So these are the two impacts when you adjust the focal length. Right, and then on top of that, usually we also use certain terms to describe this particular phenomenon as you change the focal length. One is called telephoto. So as the name suggests, that means you're trying to capture an image which is far away. Right, so it's known as telephoto. So you try to zoom in. Right, the other one is wide angle. So wide angle means you are trying to look at, your focal length is short, you are trying to look at a wide range of the view here. So this is wide angle, this is telephoto. Right, so we know that when we capture an image, one of the important things is that all these images have to go somewhere. It has to be stored onto some kind of storage device. So for this part, we are going to look at some of the issues regarding the storage. Right, in particular, we are going to look at the memory cards. Right, you know, nowadays when you when you go to a shop, you can buy different storage capacity of the memory cards. Okay, different kind of image format that you can store, right? And among them, these are the three popular image formats that you have. Right, okay, so memory card. Memory card essentially, any one of you who have not seen memory card before? I'm quite sure most of you have. It's actually the same memory card that you use for your mobile phone as well. So it's based on what is known as a flash memory. The technology involved is called EEPROM. EEPROM. Right, so this memory card has different kind of storage capacity, right? Ranging from 1 to 16 gigabyte. Nowadays, I think the current one is about 32 gigabyte, right? Okay. So anyone knows how much does it cost for 32 gigabyte memory card? $70. It depends. $30. I was told that if you go to one of the Pasar Malam, you can get it for like $5 or something. But I'm not sure how long it will last. That's the issue. And sometimes if you go to online, some of the portal, like, I'm not sure whether any one of you heard of this Q0010. Yeah, if you go there, you try to browse for this memory card. Some of them are very cheap. Yeah, but I'm not sure how reliable they are. But anyway, there's a lot of different kind of storage capacity, right? So it depends on your need. If you want to capture lots of images, of course, you buy a larger storage capacity memory card. In the past, actually, there's a different types of memory card. Okay, until like a few years back, there's different formats of the memory card that you can use. For example, the SD card, the compact flash, memory sticks, right? This XD cards by different kind of a consortium and company, right? So this is during the early stage. But nowadays, pretty much everyone has settled on one type of this memory card, which is the SD card, right? SD and the micro SD. Okay, so nowadays when you see, pretty much these are the only memory cards you'll see in the market. Right, so if you try to compare the memory card that you have with the hard disk, you see that there are advantages as well as disadvantages. So just think about it. Most of you have seen a memory card before, right? How big is it? How big is a memory card? Micro SD, how big is it? Probably the size of your pink finger, right? Okay, so this is the size of memory card, and hard disk, of course, is much bigger. Yeah, so if you want to compare the advantages and disadvantages of these two storage devices, hard disk versus memory card, it's quite easy. Even without me listing, you'll be able to visualize and see the advantages and disadvantages. So the advantages of flash memory card, of course, if you think about it, is small, it's light, okay, there's no moving part, and it's also very easy to transfer. For example, if you want to transfer the photo that you have captured using a mobile phone or using a digital camera, you just plug out the memory card and stick it onto your notebook or PC. So these are the advantages of the memory card. Okay, quiet, light, small, no moving part, easy to transfer data. Right. However, of course, there's also some disadvantages of this memory card. First is that the cost per megabyte or gigabyte is more expensive. For unit cost, like just now, for example, if you one of our friends here over here says that for 32 gigabyte, how much does it cost? About $30, right? Or it actually should be higher. So that means it will be about $1 for 1 gigabyte. As compared to hard disk. Hard disk currently 1 terabyte, how much is it? Anyone? Anyone works in Challenger? Part-time? I can go and see you and buy cheaper hard disk. Right, hard disk 1 terabyte, how much is it currently? 100 something, okay, yeah, I think, yeah, around that. So if 1 terabyte is about $100, that means 1 gigabyte is about 10 cents, right? So you can see per gigabyte for hard disk is actually cheaper than memory card. So that's one disadvantage of memory card over hard disk. The second one is that the storage capacity is smaller. Okay, I think this one is quite clear. Right, so the next thing is that we are going to look at a few different formats of that you can store the photos. Right, so many of you, I believe, have played with this digital camera or your mobile phone that you can capture the image. When you capture the image, there's a few different image formats that you can store. Right, there's a few that you can store. Among them, there's a few popular ones. The first one, currently the most popular one is known as JPEG. Okay, JPEG here. So JPEG is actually an image compression standard, and the outcome of this image compression standard is known as a JPEG. You can store it as a JPEG file format. Okay, JPEG file format. Right. So you can see that therefore this JPEG, right? Okay, is a technique for you to perform the compression. So when you try to perform this JPEG compression, actually there's one parameter you can change. Right, there's one parameter you can change. Right, so this parameter actually is a trade-off between the storage requirement versus the image quality. Right, so this parameter Q is known as the quantization parameter. So if you increase the quantization parameter, then your compressed image file size is going to be small. Okay, but what is the price you have to pay? The image quality, the compressed image quality would not be so good anymore. Okay, on the other hand, right, when you perform this JPEG compression, if your quantization parameter, Q parameter, is small, right, that means your file size is going to be big. Right, if your file size is going to be big, right, ideally it's actually not so good. But the good thing about it is that even though your file size is big, the image quality will also be good. So in short, what I'm trying to say is that, right, when you perform JPEG compression, there's a parameter that you can select to achieve a trade-off between storage size and image quality. Okay? Right, so as I mentioned that smaller storage size means that the quality usually will be lower and vice versa. So this particular image here gives you an indication of different types of compression factor that you can achieve. So for this particular image on the left here, right, this is with a compression factor of 10 to 1. So what's the meaning of compression factor of 10 to 1? Anyone? What's the meaning of a compression factor of 10 to 1? When someone tells you that, no, I can achieve an image compression factor of 10 to 1, what does it mean? So if originally for the uncompressed image, say suppose it is 1 megabyte, right, with a 10 to 1 compression factor, what's the file size of the compressed image? Will be, initially it's say 1 megabyte. So after a 10 to 1 compression factor, it will become 100 kilobyte. Huh? So that's what the meaning of this compression factor here. So with a compression factor of 10 to 1, this is the image how it looks like. Okay? Whereas for a 40 to 1 compression factor, of course, this compression factor is much higher. That means the file size that you have is much smaller now. So if you compare between these two, can you see some artifacts near this edge region? Right? Okay, so that's why this particular two images here is trying to demonstrate to you that there's a trade-off between the storage size and the image quality. For most people, usually a compression factor of 10 to 1 is considered as reasonable, right? That you will not be able to see much difference in terms of the visual perception, whether it's compressed or not. Right, okay, so JPEG is one of the most popular image compression standards, okay, because it's able to perform efficient compression while preserving still pretty good image quality. So other image format that you have, the other one is called TIFF, right? TIFF stands for Tag Image File Format. So for this image format is commonly used in application or in areas such as publishing house. Whereas one of the key considerations for TIFF image is that the image quality or fidelity is very important. Okay, so therefore, if you compare the whole operations of this image compression, so okay, what happened is that, right, for your image coming in, right, it hit the particular sensor array. So afterwards, they perform this Bay interpolation. Can anyone still remember what this Bay interpolation is for? This is actually Bay interpolation. In this case, is actually the image demosaiking, right? Because if you remember, for image coming in, you have a CFA array, whereas your sensor array only gets some sample of the color information. So from this sample image, you need to reconstruct 3 full channels, right? So this particular process is because of the CFA thing, so you want to do a color demosaiking. And then afterwards, you have this color corrections and so on. So if you choose to save it as a JPEG image format, then you need to go through a JPEG compression, right? We'll study a little bit more in the subsequent lectures, right? Okay. Or alternatively, if you feel that this image quality is very important, you may choose to save it as a TIFF format. Okay. So the good thing about TIFF format, as I mentioned to you before, is that usually it has a very high image quality. So that's a good thing. Then the bad thing about it is that it requires much larger storage requirement than JPEG. Right. Okay. So sometimes you may want to, instead of storing the image using JPEG or TIFF, you may want to save it as a raw image format. So as the name suggests, the raw, the word raw means that the data are actually a raw data. Because earlier on, if you see that for the JPEG and the TIFF image format, you can see these two image formats here, the JPEG and the TIFF. You let the computer do most of the color corrections for you. Okay. Sometimes you may not want the computer or on the digital camera to do the correction for you, because sometimes the chips on the digital camera may not be smarter than what you want to do. So in those cases, actually you want to have access to the original data that's captured from the image sensor. So what you have is that this image sensor coming in, and then you have the analog to digital conversion, and then afterwards you want to capture this raw data, right? And then if you are a very professional photographer, you would actually want to have this raw data so that you can manipulate to achieve the best quality, rather than letting the digital camera do it for you. Okay? So that's the reason sometimes you may want to store the image in a raw form. So now that we have explained about that, okay, we'll do a quick comparison. Right, so JPEG, the good thing about JPEG is that it's a very efficient image compression standard. So the file size that you're going to achieve is very small. And the second thing is that JPEG now is a very popular image format. So you can easily transfer across different platforms. You should be able to open up the JPEG file, no problem. So those are the advantages. The disadvantages is that for JPEG, actually there's a few different modes. But one of the most popular mode for you to perform the compression is known as the baseline JPEG. And baseline JPEG is a lossy format. Okay, so what's the meaning of a lossy format? What's the meaning of lossy compression? So when you perform compression, there's many ways you can classify them, but there are two broad ways you can perform this categorization of image compression. One is known as lossless, the other is known as lossy. So from the word, it's a lossless. Lossless compression means that suppose you have the original image, you perform the compression, so the file size now will become smaller. So afterwards, you perform reconstruction, right? This reconstructed or the compressed image will be identical with your original image. If that's the case, then it's known as lossless compression, right? I think the word itself is quite self-explanatory. Whereas for lossy compression, as the word suggests, that means you lose some information. Okay, so you have the original image. After you perform lossy compression, the file size will become smaller. Okay, and then afterwards you perform reconstruction, you'll get the reconstructed image. So this reconstructed image will be a little bit different from the original image. Okay, if that's the case, that means some information has been lost. So for those cases, we call lossy compression. So now that I've explained these two, lossy and lossless compression, so you may be wondering, okay, so one is lossless, one is lossy. So if I ask you to choose which one you should go for, probably in first glance, most of you would think you should go for. Yeah, one is lossless, one is lossy. Which one should you go for? Yes? Lossless, right? I mean, if I were you, no, I also thought I should go for lossless, because lossless, you don't lose any information. But the matter of fact is that in many image compression standards, the compression you're using is lossy compression rather than lossless. Can anyone guess why is it so? In most of the practical image compression techniques that we have, usually we use lossy rather than lossless. Why is it so? Why? Okay, yeah, that is probably true, but there's another more important reason. What you're saying is that, okay, even if you lose a little bit of information by using lossy compression, it does not matter so much, right? Because visually it looks very similar to us. Yes, that is true, but still it doesn't explain why you go for lossy. Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, your friend here, from the slide, very smart. Okay. Yeah, I was thinking that you probably study in advance before you attend the lecture, right? Okay. Yeah. Okay. So the reason why sometimes you still want to go for lossy compression is mainly because for lossy compression, usually their compression ratio that can be achieved is much higher than lossless compression. Okay. So for lossy compression, you can compress the file size into much smaller size, while visually actually it doesn't make too much of a difference. Okay, so that's why for many compression standards we use the lossy compression. But at times we will probably still use lossless compression. For example, if you are trying to compress a medical images, for medical image, the image quality is very important. So for those cases, if you are trying to compress medical image, then you should go for lossless or lossy. You should go for lossless, right? Okay, so I think that one is quite intuitive. Okay, so I think this pretty much summarizes it. Okay. So the disadvantages for JPEG is that, okay, in JPEG, the most popular mode is called baseline JPEG. And baseline JPEG is a lossy mode, that means you'll lose some information. So how much information you will lose will depend on the compression factor, the quantization parameter Q that you're using. So the higher compression ratio that you have, the more information you'll lose, okay? Right, so TIFF, as I mentioned, a few times to you before, TIFF is usually used in publishing house. Okay, so once you know that TIFF is used in publishing house, right away you can relate to a few things. First, publishing house means that the image quality must be large, right? So the image quality must be high. So therefore, for TIFF image, usually the quality is high, but definitely there's a price you have to pay. If the quality is high, that means you have to, the storage requirement will be larger. So those are the main pros and cons of TIFF, right? Advantage, high quality, is used in many software right? Most of the software can support TIFF format, but the disadvantage is the big file size. And because it's big file size, sometimes when you do the onboard camera processing, it may take a little bit longer for you to do the processing and storing. RAW, so this one we mentioned to you before. The RAW is that you try to capture the raw data from your image sensor without letting the computer do the adjustment or correction for you. So the good thing is that you have the raw data, so you can, if you are very good, you can do a fantastic job, right? But if you are not professional, you better don't touch it, right? You better deal with the JPEG or TIFF image, right? So the good thing is that we allow manipulations of the images. If you are really good, you can produce the best quality image you want, okay? However, the disadvantage is that it's larger compared to, for example, JPEG. And for this image format, raw format, you cannot port it so readily. For example, if you just use one of your common image editing software, you may not be able to open up the file format because it's not so commonly supported. So you need proper software to convert it into popular file formats such as JPEG and so on. Right, okay, so when you store a particular image, some of you may not know. When you store an image, actually you store a few things. One thing that you store is, of course, the visual information. Yeah, I think it's quite intuitive. When you try to save a particular image, of course, you need to save the visual content of the particular photo. But on top of that, usually for a particular image, there's also a header file. Okay, header file that provides some context or metadata information. So this header file is known as the EXIF, right? EXIF, right? Stands for Exchangeable Image File Format, right? So if you can see this particular EXIF file header here, you can see some of the information here. For example, information that it captures include, right, what is the camera, what is the make, Canon, okay, the model, right, it actually tells you the resolution, okay, what other things, the exposure time, the shutter speed, the ISO rating, right, and so on and so forth. So actually, that's what I'm trying to say. When you're trying to capture an image, actually you capture a lot more information than what you think. Not just the visual content, but also the time you capture it, what camera you are capturing, and so on and so forth. Okay? Right, so an important component with digital camera is that, right, once you capture an image, right, you store the images onto the local storage devices, and then later on you need to transfer it somewhere else, right? Otherwise, if you just store it on the mobile, on this particular digital camera, it may not be of so much use. So therefore, connectivity is an important component. How do you transfer this captured image to some other places? So over the years, there's many different ways you can transfer this storage. Right, for example, you can use a USB. Everyone's familiar with USB. Okay, in the past, you have this FireWire, which is commonly used for video transmission. Okay, and then some card reader. Right, whereas if you store the image onto the flash memory card, you can just transfer it to another place. So USB here, this slide here just give you a quick overview. Right. So USB, is to facilitate connection to usually PC. Right, there's a few, over the years, there have been a few different evolutions of USB. You start with USB 1.0 to 2.0 to 3.0. So as in all this evolution, you know that when you move to a higher version, that means the performance becomes better. All right, so you do notice that from USB 1, 2 to 3, right, first thing is that the transfer speed increased over the time. Okay, from 12 megabits per second, okay, to 480 to about 5 gigabits per second now, right? So currently, in 2010, right, USB 3.0 is still not so popular. But nowadays, if you happen to go to buy a hard disk, you see most of them now support this USB 3.0 now, okay? So for many digital camera, actually they also support some of this USB transmission for you to transfer the file for your local storage to your PC, for example. Right. Another way you can transmit this image is called FireWire. Right. It's also known as IEEE 1394 standard. Right. So this standard actually initially originated from Apple. Right. It's commonly used to transmit video files. Okay. But nowadays, even this FireWire is not so popular anymore. Okay, because USB actually you can transfer the file much faster, and actually for most people, they just simply take out the flash memory and stick it onto their PC. Right, earlier on, as I mentioned to you before, in the past, even a few years back, there's a few different modes of these memory cards here. For example, memory sticks, SD card, micro SD, and then XD, and so on and so forth. That's why in the past, you probably still need to have this memory card reader as an interface. But nowadays, again, because SD card becomes so dominant now, you don't see this memory card reader much more nowadays. Okay, yeah, we know that for a digital camera, you definitely need to have power for it to work. So in order to support the power, you should have the battery. So typically, there's two types of battery. One is a rechargeable battery. The other is a disposable. After you use, you just throw it away. So this graph here actually just tell you, right, so for the battery requirement of a digital camera, you need to make sure that the power is within a stable range. Okay, so this is, for example, the range that the power is required for the digital camera to work properly. So most of the camera, either the rechargeable one or the disposable battery, most of them are able to provide relatively stable power until it starts to run out of charges. Right, and the battery nowadays, the rechargeable battery, the most dominant one is based on lithium-ion technology. Right, okay, so next we are going to look at some of the functionalities of digital camera. Okay, in particular, there's a few we are going to look at: optical image stabilizer, face recognition, and red eye effect correction. So some of you probably have heard about this before. So the first one is the optical image stabilizer. So short form OIS. OIS is probably a relatively standard feature nowadays in most of the digital camera. So why do you need to use this OIS? Okay, the reason why you want to, why most of the smart digital camera have this OIS is that because when you capture an image, sometimes your hand can move or shake a little bit. Right, if you don't have enough iodine, your hand will shake a little bit, especially when you use a chopstick. So when your hand shake a little bit, when you capture the image will become a little bit blurred. Okay, so this situation will actually become more serious in some cases, such as when you are trying to capture the image in a dark environment. You know that we are trying to capture an image in a dark environment. Okay, usually because if it's dark, in order for the image to have proper exposure, your shutter speed will be fast or slow. Slow, right? Because you want the shutter to be open for a longer duration of time so that your image sensor will get more exposure. But what's the disadvantages of doing that? What's the negative point of having a slower shutter speed? You tend to get more blurry image. Okay, you tend to get more blurry image. So that's why what I'm trying to say is that in some cases, for example, when you're trying to capture an image in poor lighting condition, your image tends to be blurred. Okay, because your shutter speed is slower, the duration of the shutter being open is longer. So therefore, this is one of the situations when you may need to use this optical image stabilizer, right, when you're using a slow shutter speed. Not just in the poor lighting condition, in other cases as well. Right, another thing is that if you're trying to capture image that's very far away or that's very nearby, okay, the image you capture is also more prone to your hand shake. If your hand just move a little bit, it will become blur. Okay, if you are trying to capture image far away or nearby. So you can see another cases when the photo that you capture is prone to being blurred is when you're trying to take an image that's very far away, known as a telephoto, or you're trying to capture an image that's very nearby, known as a macro photo. Okay, so how does this optical image stabilizers in a digital camera works? So it works by using a gyro sensor to do the correction. Let's see how it works. So the easiest way to show it is through an example here. So suppose if you have a particular object that you're trying to capture, this is the point A you're trying to capture here. So if you do not have any handshake, it's very straightforward. This image here, right, will be captured at this particular point in the image sensor. So everything is sharp and clear, no problem. Right, but what happens if no, your hand shake a little bit. Okay, your hand move a little bit. So you can see previously this particular point here supposed to be going to B, but because now your hand shake a little bit, okay, the alignment of the camera may be a little bit out. So instead of going to B, this particular location here now will be going to B prime. Right, so what happened, that means for a particular position, location here, now it will be projected or it will be captured above B as well as B prime. So one point in the physical world mapped to 2 pixel location in the image. Of course, the image is going to become blurred. Yes? So in order to rectify, what you want to do is that, no, ideally you want this B prime to move this particular B prime back to B. Okay, you want to move this from B prime back to B. So how do you do it? You use something called gyro sensor to detect the hand movement or jitter, right? And then you do the proper adjustment to make sure that this particular point is mapped back to B rather than the second position. Okay. So this particular example here shows you the effect without using image stabilizer and with image stabilizer. So the columns on the left columns are those if your iOS is off, if you do not use this image stabilizer. Okay, you can see the first one is blurred because of this slow shutter speed due to poor lighting. You can see it's blurred. This is a telephoto. You want to take a bird far away. This is a macro photo. You want to take something very nearby. So in these 3 cases, they are very prone to blurring. But if you switch on this, okay, iOS or OIS here, you can see a high quality and sharp image can be produced. Okay, in real life, actually, there's also other things that can perform this stabilizing. So I thought this video is actually interesting. I'll also show you. Okay.
Hey, it's me, Destin. I got my dad a present for Father's Day, and it's kind of weird, so I figured I'd show you an interesting principle with the present. It's a chicken. I got my dad a chicken for Father's Day, and I want to show you a pretty interesting method that chickens have to keep their head stable. You know, in guidance and control, you have feedback loops, and so you have to know your position and where your relative motion is going so you can compensate for it. But chickens are really good at this, so I'll show you. Watch his head stay totally stationary as I move his body. I can move his body in pretty much any direction, and his head stays rock solid in one position. This is really hard to do. So anyway, he knows exactly where his body is and where his body's moving. It's kind of fun to watch, isn't it? So they're really good at it. I don't really know why, but I'm sure there's an explanation. There's my sister Brawley with the other chicken. We got Dad, so anyway.
Tail straight. Up, down, up, down.
Look how solid his head is. That's kind of stupid. It'd probably peck me in the eyes, so I'll stop now. Alright, so bye.
The perfect Father's Day gift.
Yep, he liked it.
Right, okay, so this is a natural way of doing a stabilizing. Okay, so another common features in camera nowadays is the face detection. You can see most of camera nowadays can do a face detection. So how this face detection works is that you use some kind of a face detection algorithm, a pattern recognition algorithm to detect the face. So you may ask, why do you want to have a face detection algorithm when you're taking a photo? So the thing is that often when you take a photo, you simply let the camera take over most of the things. But this camera is actually not that smart. How do they know that whether you're trying to capture an image in front or which is far away, and what kind of proper exposures should be provided, and so on and so forth. So that's why face detection become an important feature in digital camera, which is, right, if you use the face, for most digital camera, it can detect this face by using some pattern recognition algorithm. So once it can detect the face, then it will know, okay, what is the length, focal length that you need to have to make them sharp, okay? And also, you will know what is the proper setting to provide the exposure, what is the aperture setting or what's the shutter speed setting, the proper one, to give the best quality image. Okay, that's why you see that for many of the current digital camera, it does have this face detection algorithm to provide the proper support to capture the best quality image. Okay. Right, another thing that you see often is this thing known as the red eye effect. Red eye effect. I'm quite sure most of you have seen it before. It's not because of vampire. It's a red eye effect. So this red eye effect actually is quite simple. Why it happens is because our eye, behind our eye we know there's a retina. And retina, there's a lot of blood vessels. So when the light comes in, it hit the retina and got reflected. Right, when you capture, this is what happens. You have the red eye effect. Actually, it happens to the animal as well. If you have taken photos of the animal, you'll notice that it also shows some color. But what color is it? Have you tried? If you have not done any, go home tonight, try out your dog or your cat, try to capture image of their eye. You see that for animal, they also have something similar, but it's not red color. Maybe, on Wednesday when you come back, you can tell me what color you will see if you're trying to capture these images of a cat or a dog. Right, so anyway, so now that you understand the mechanism of why this red eye effect happens. So if you know why it happened, then you can come up with different ways to prevent it, or to at least alleviate or minimize this red eye effect. Right, I think some of this information, because it's so straightforward, you can go home and read it yourself. Right, I pretty much just want to cover the main essence. Right, so now that you understand why this red eye effect occurs, okay, it's because the light hitting the retina got reflected, captured by the camera. So how can you minimize this red eye effect? Right, I think the most sensible thing is that, right, there's a few things you can do. One is that, okay, you should try to, if you use a flash to capture an image, this light hitting the retina and got reflected, then this effect will be very pronounced. So one way for you to reduce the red eye effect is avoid using flash. Yeah, avoid using flash so that the light that is reflected will not be so severe. So you, number one, avoid using flash if possible. Then they will reduce the extent of the red eye effect. The second thing is that some of you probably have seen it before. When you take an image, right? Sometimes, like before it actually flash and you take the photo, there's like a blink of light. Have anyone feel that before? Right, before an image is really taken, sometimes you see there's a blink of light. Right, so this thing is known as a pre-flash. Okay, so the idea of this pre-flash is that because when your eye see that thing, pupil will not dilate, it will become smaller. So because it becomes smaller, therefore later on when the actual flash comes or the actual image is being captured, because the pupil now is much smaller, so the extent of red eye effect will be smaller as well. So that's why using this pre-flash is also one way to reduce the red eye effect. Okay, I think the explanation is given here, just like what I said. Another thing is that finally, if nothing works at all, just use the image editing to remove it. Right. Okay, I think I'll probably stop here. Just for those of you who come in late, I'm just quickly flash this particular announcement again. Right, next Monday there's going to be a quiz, account for 25%. Right, okay. So it's next Monday, yeah? This is the time, lasts for 30 minutes. It will be conducted in 2 LT. So according to your surname, you go to different LT. Right, 30 MCQs. Right, for my part, you cover the first 100 page of my slide. Okay, right, I'll see you on Wednesday.